Yeah, well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And especially given that it's been great kind of meeting in person across the conference circuit. Always happy to do kind of community events like this, and obviously like very supportive of everything that Superteam is doing. So I really appreciate it. So let me give maybe a quick introduction into myself as well as into Airfoil as a company. So first of all, just into into myself and my own background. So my name is Phil Hediatnia. I grew up in the U.S. I've lived in Canada. I've spent some time living across the U.S. in San Francisco, which is where I worked for most of my career. And also, most recently, for the past 2 years, I've been based in Singapore, which is where Airfoil's main HQ is. Um, I'm a product designer by trade, but I've also been a VC. I've also worked as an engineer. I've had a variety of different founding roles at different startups, most of which has been in Silicon Valley. And for the past 4 years, I've been running Airfoil, which is a product design and development studio focused on the Web3 space. Over the past 4 years, we've worked on over 150 products across the space, including we can count, Solana Labs and Solana Foundation as clients of ours. We've also worked with the fine folks at Near. We worked on like Solana Name Service. We worked on Drift Protocol, on Zeta Markets, many other projects across. Yeah, I've been working in crypto now for basically close to 4 years. After spending a long time working on more traditional fintech and then making that transition. So I'm based in Singapore, but our team is global. So we have actually a quite substantial team based in Ho Chi Minh, including the fourth employee that I ever hired at the company, Chung Nguyen, who's still with our team today. And so I actually do come by Ho Chi Minh quite frequently. So I'm around, I would say, once every, let's say, like 2 to 3 months. And I plan on keeping that up. So obviously I have a really high opinion of both like the builder communities that are in Vietnam, but also crypto's ability to solve real problems in the Vietnamese market. And so, yeah, I hope that provides kind of a basic background for me. But happy to kind of take this session however works best for people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I see you have many experience in the Web3 space. And especially it's about the designs and product. So yeah, very happy with you can share a little bit
sure.
your knowledge about our topic today is about design principle for Web3. So you can take the screen, sharing slide, and yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Yeah, happy to. So what I'm going to try to do today is a kind of an abridged version of some of what I did at Breakpoint. The good thing is that the talk that I normally give when I do sessions like this, I basically gave the same talk for Breakpoint, and Solana put it online. So I'll be sure to share over that link as well, so you can pass it on to folks in the Discord. But rather than rehash all of those points, I want to give you a quick summary of what I think is important to keep in mind as you're designing your products in the Web3 space, and then maybe cross to some practical advice, because I'm guessing that the majority of you in the audience are either at the stage where you're hacking on an idea, or you're now at the point of looking to solicit capital and need to be able to prove out your idea enough to do so. And there may be some places where I can jump in and provide some advice. So give me one moment. I'm just pulling up some of my slides on my side, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay. Okay, I've got my slides. This is going to be the fastest version of this presentation I've ever done, but I want to make sure we have a chance to like really get into Q&A and all of that. Because there's some of this that I know you will be able to access online. Great. Okay, so I'm sharing entire screen. Allow notifications muted. Yes, notifications are muted. Great. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay. So this was a version of a talk that I gave at Founders School at Breakpoint called Design for Web3 Founders. This link as well contains a link to the recorded version of the original talk that I gave at Breakpoint, as well as links to some of the resources that I'll mention throughout the presentation as well. So it's something to take a note of. Definitely can pass it on in the chat as well. I've already given you background into Airfoil, some of what we do. Of course, those are some of the visuals that we've worked on, most recently working on Drip. But I want to start by actually covering like what is design fundamentally. I think that when we talk about design, a lot of times we talk about the last thing on the screen, UI design. We talk about how things look, aesthetics, typography, color, stuff like that. But I'm here to really say that ultimately that stuff doesn't matter. Like when you're going for mass market consumer products, then aesthetics absolutely matter. Providing visual flair, getting people interested. When you're entering a market that is already crowded, I think it's really important to get that stuff right. But ultimately, for most of us, we are trying to build products that utilize blockchains to do things that couldn't be done without them. It's the classic example of a product that if you are able to strike at your user need the right way, that your user will put up with whatever interface you have in order to utilize your solution. And the way to get that right is to focus actually on the first two, on product design and UX design. When I see a lot of talks about design, I don't think it really talks enough about this. So I want to focus on that in today's presentation. So what is design fundamentally? As Don Norman put it in The Design of Everyday Things, design is really an act of communication, which means having a deep understanding of the person with whom the designer is communicating. And that is maybe the fundamental point of the entire talk, which is that in a similar way to when I sit here and give a talk to all of you, I'm thinking not just about what it is that I want to say, but I'm thinking about what it is that you need to hear and how to put it in a way that you or anybody else will understand. That's communication. You enter a negotiation with someone, you're trying to understand what's going on in their head when they come into the room. You're trying to understand where are they coming from so you can relate with them. Design is fundamentally the same thing. It's understanding your user, understanding what's going on in their head, anticipating it, and making sure that everything from your interface copy to your UI elements to your user flow anticipates them and provides that communication, answers whatever questions they have in their head. In other words, building something is about you, designing is about them. And so across the presentation, I want to run through these three key points: the importance of communicating with your users, preparing users for major points of friction, and managing your users' attention. And I think that if we're able to do a better job of each of these three things, we'll be able to build far better products across the Web3 space together. And of course, beneath that, I'll be providing lots and lots of advice and examples that hopefully are helpful to you. So first, on the general point of communicating with your users, I want to talk about how we frame the ideas that we present. When we're telling people about our products, how do we convey it to them in a way that they're going to understand? And the answer is to always start with why. There's a TED Talk by a guy named Simon Sinek. He is a TED Talk called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And the reason I love it is he runs through this example of what he calls the golden circle, which encapsulates how businesses pitch their products. So if you ask, like, how does Lenovo or how does Dell or Samsung sell a laptop? They start from the what, then move to the how, and maybe approach the why. They say, we have a laptop with a 4K screen with 12 hours of battery life that's beautifully designed, yada, yada, yada. Then they say, well, because we've invested so much in R&D and people and design and whatever. The why is completely vague. It's hard for me to describe, like, what is the mission statement of Samsung? What is the mission statement of Dell or Lenovo? There's not really much of a mission statement. The mission statement is to make money. And people don't identify with that. Like, people have to identify with a mission of some kind. Apple does the opposite. They start from the inside and move out. So the why. We believe that technology should fade into your everyday life. We believe that every interaction you should have with a piece of technology should leave a smile on your face. It should be beautifully designed. It should bring you some sort of joy. We hire the how, we hire the best designers, we hire the best engineers. The what? We happen to make computers. Want to buy one. It's a completely different pitch. And so in everything you do, it's important to have a why and state that why to your user, because that's how they're going to identify with your product. And that's what's going to enable them to, that's what's going to keep them in your product. That's what's going to get them to share that product with other people. So in crypto, we don't do a very good job of this. We're constantly focused on the what. Discover, collect, and sell extraordinary NFTs. When in reality, it's very easy to flip this on its head. Stello is a layer that lives in front of your MetaMask wallet to prevent you from inadvertently connecting your wallet to scams. We wrote this landing page for them. Explore Web3 with confidence. Stello protects your wallet from scams and phishing so you can discover Web3 with peace of mind. We're stating a why. The why is we believe you should be able to browse confidently. And everything else we do is just the what. Because we believe, in other words, like the test here is, can you say, because X, we do Y? Because we believe that everyone should feel confident on the web, that's your because, we build a layer that protects you from Web3 scams and phishing. If you can fill that sentence in, then you have a clear why. Now, why am I hinging so much on this point? Why is this something I'm emphasizing so much? It's because one thing we know from user testing all the time is that people don't really read your landing page. Users spend basically between 4 and 5 seconds on your landing page before they make a decision of whether or not to continue to the app itself, whether or not to download it, etc. So in other words, you're putting all that context on your landing page, you're investing tons of time into that copywriting, no one's reading it. What they need is something in the first couple seconds that hooks them and convinces them this product is for me. And if they get that, they're going to continue to read longer, they're going to continue to download the app, etc. And then you can take it from there. So very, very important to get this right. Second, mind your user's health bar. Essentially, the key point here is that every time your user proceeds through your application, they're being worn down in some way. They're doing work for you. They're taking effort. And that means that as it goes, think about it like a health bar, that health bar comes down and down and down and down the further your user goes through your application. So what we can do to make sure that users have a better experience, and Glow, I think, did a very good job of this. When you think about it, Glow could just skip you directly from slide 1 to slide 4, from create new wallet right there to the end. Now, why doesn't it do that? Why does it have a screen that says welcome to your new wallet and then has a button that says let's go? That seems superfluous, right? It's not. It's important because when they get to that final screen, they've already taken several minutes to download the app, put it on their, go to the app store, put it on their phone, open it up, press something. They've already been taking action after action. They need some sort of reward. So you need to find some way to give them a moment of delight, something early that resets that health bar. So now that they get to something complex where they need to like transfer assets to a wallet or begin exploring, they have enough incentive to do so. You're constantly going to lose momentum as your user goes through your onboarding flow. Your job is to find some way to re-accelerate that momentum again and again and again to keep them from going away. So how do we practically do this? Well, there's a tool that's very easy to use or very helpful to use. It's called the user journey map. And basically you map out your entire onboarding flow and break it down like this. Actions, what does the user do? Touch points, what part of the product or service does the user interact with? Thoughts, what is the user thinking? Feelings, how is the user feeling? Pain points, what problems does the user encounter? Opportunities, how can we improve the user's experience? If you just put this stuff down on paper, it is incredibly helpful. And it makes it helps you also understand where you might not understand enough about your user. If you can't fill all this stuff out for memory, then it means you probably should do some user testing. You should probably do some interviews. You should probably do some live onboarding sessions, things like that. And again, you don't need to be a professional designer to do it. But you just need to use this guide as the litmus test. Use this guide to double check your work and make sure that you have all the information you need. If you can't fill this page out, then there's probably some more research that you need to do. Now, this is a really important point, I think, for Web3 companies. It's the importance of preparing users for jumps. So there's going to be lots of places in any application, Web3, Web2, doesn't really matter. There's always going to be places where users have to engage in something that's a point of friction. They have to do something that's really hard. And so we need to prepare them. Before I said we need to provide them a moment of delight, but sometimes we just have to actually just prepare them, like tell them what is about to happen. And that isn't done enough in Web3. So here's the example that I always go back to. This is an app called Cluster running on an iPhone 4. And Cluster is basically an app that helps you share photo galleries with your friends. However, in order to share galleries with your friends, it needs to know who your friends are, which means it needs to have access to your contact list on your phone. What happens when an app requests a contact list? Well, this screen comes up that says Cluster would like to access your contacts. Now, here's why this screen is a little dangerous. First, if the user clicks don't allow, well, then the app won't work. You need to have access to contacts in order for a social app to work. But if you click OK, your user has now been presented with something that's a little jarring, a little scary. They have no context as to why that's being asked for, and as a result, that health bar that I was talking about before has been brought down substantially. So how do we deal with this? Interstitial. Now, use address book. Inviting friends is simple when choosing them from the address book on your phone. Otherwise, you'll have to type contact info individually. Now, the brilliance of this screen is that it not only tells the user that something is about to happen, it warns them so that they're prepared, but it reframes something that causes friction as something good for the user. Before, it was, hey, there's going to be this scary screen that comes up in a second, and you're going to have to say okay. Now it's saying, if you say okay on the next screen, we'll make it even easier for you to invite your friends and save you time. It's reframing something that's a point of friction as something that's good for the user. If you're able to do this well, then you're able to make sure that your user has a good experience. Now, here's why I bring this up. How many times in building any application do we end up with this exact same screen? Or in Solana world, do we end up with signed transaction over and over again? One of the solutions, yes, is what Phantom rolled out with auto approve. But even then, you still need to connect your wallet the first time, and you still need to sign the first time in order for auto approve to work. So ultimately, the better way to do this is to prepare users for that jump, to let them know, for example, if we're talking about connecting a wallet, one place for all your collectibles, never log in again, access for mobile and desktop. Give them an idea of what's about to happen and reframe it from something that's going to cause them friction to something that's going to be valuable for them. So thinking more practically, let's say that you're building a DeFi or fintech app on crypto rails for the Vietnamese market. If you say something like, store all of your assets or your digital assets, I think most people would probably say, why do I need to do that? I have ZaloPay, I have MomoPay, I already have a digital wallet. Why do I need another one, right? And so just saying like connect your wallet, it's going to confuse some people. But instead you can say, for example, we can lean into the terminology or lean into the argument that these are assets that no one can take from you. These are assets you can use anywhere. I would even lean into the ability for people to have assets including like USDC natively in their wallet in seconds, right? We've got to sort of make the argument in these interfaces to our users that there's something for them to seriously gain by onboarding to a crypto wallet. And we should lean into the censorship resistance, the exposure to global stablecoins. We should be constantly weaving that in so that people understand what is fundamentally better for them about a digital crypto wallet than any sort of digital cash wallet that they may already have. On that note, and I've kind of touched on this already, there's an importance of giving first, then expecting in return. So I think in everything you do, it's possible to reframe your user flow as give first, then ask. Let me give you an example of this. You probably know Dialect, which is the wallet-to-wallet messaging app on Solana. And Dialect has a unique problem, which is that for any chat application, chat applications are useless unless you have other people to chat with on the application. That's a lot of work on an early user. If you sign up for Dialect and nobody else you know is on Dialect, you have to get everyone else you know to join Dialect in order for it to be useful. And the reality is just most people aren't going to do that. They have better things to do with their lives. They have a TV show they want to watch. They're not going to go and onboard 20 of their friends. So how do we hack this? How do we get them to engage? Well, in that user flow that I just described, we're asking them to do something for us, and then we'll provide them something in return. We're asking them, hey, get all of your friends to join Dialect, and then after they're there, then you can chat with them and have a good time. So what's the better way to do this? The better way to do this is to give them something first, then ask. So what does Dialect do? When you open Dialect for the first time, they drop you a welcome pack of stickers. You mint those stickers on chain, and you have this beautiful sticker animation. It opens up, and then you have all these stickers, and you can immediately begin using them in conversations on Dialect. But how do you use them on conversations on Dialect? Well, you got to have your friends on Dialect, right? And there you go. Something that would have been ask the user to do work for you has been flipped to giving the user something so that they're inclined to do work for you. It's a small thing, but it makes a massive difference in getting to mass adoption. Now, I mentioned before this point, so I don't want to dive into it too much, but it's always important to make sure that your onboarding is not just compact. I think that a misconception that a lot of people have about UI UX design is that the quickest interfaces, the interfaces where you press the least number of buttons, are the interfaces that are best for the user. And that's just fundamentally not true. Onboarding is a journey that goes all the way from the original landing page where the user first sees your application all the way through to when they take their first meaningful action within the product. So if you're building a DEX, for example, the onboarding flow is everything from when they first get to your DEX's website all the way through to when they complete their first trade. So you want, of course, the number of steps that gets them to the end of that process to be as short as possible. But when you start pulling out too many steps in the middle, what will often happen is your user will, steps that could help you, steps like providing your user with rewards or points, steps like stepping your user through how to use the interface, providing them some sort of guide, referencing documentation, things like that. If you pull too many of those things out, your user is going to get lost, and then they're not going to make it to the end. They're not going to make it to that end stage where they make their first trade. They're going to get stuck somewhere in the middle and say, I don't really need to do this. I can do something else in my life and go do that. So it's not just about reducing the number of clicks. For you to have the shortest possible onboarding flow, sometimes your onboarding actually needs to be longer. So we have a lot of different examples of this, but Gridlock is a social recovery wallet that we worked on. And a really tricky thing about social recovery wallets is that essentially how they work is you're able to designate a certain number of other people as guardians who can help you recover your wallet using ZK Tech. They can't see your secret, your private key. You can't see your private key, but they can help you recover your wallet by simply indicating on their wallets that your wallet should be recovered and reset. It's really brilliant because it means that we probably, we may not have to use, secret recovery keys in the future. However, the tricky thing is this. First of all, you've got to onboard a lot of your friends in order for it to make to work. And second, in order to successfully onboard them, they have to understand what this thing actually is. They have to understand how a social recovery wallet works. And importantly, they have to understand why it's important for them to keep the Gridlock app on their phone. Because if all of your friends who you onboarded to Gridlock all delete the app, you have no way to recover your wallet, and all of a sudden the app is useless to you. So what did we do? We added those 3 onboarding screens towards the beginning, explaining what it means to be a guardian, thanking them for what they do, and giving them, a bit of an idea that there is actually a consequence if they get rid of gridlock. There's a consequence if they move away. That's super important. Don't skip that. I see so many protocols that when you go to their website, you're launched directly into the application itself. And if the user wants to find documentation, they have to go to YouTube or they have to go to Gitbook. First of all, most people aren't going to do that. Most people are just going to click away. Second, it creates an experience where your user may not be completely prepared. They may then do something risky. They may do something they shouldn't, and all of a sudden you will be held responsible for their behavior. So it's important to make sure that you're holding people's hands along the way and making sure they're very prepared. And the last and final point is around attention. I'm just going to maybe just make this one key point, which is that when you're designing any page, keep focus on one thing per page. We didn't do a good job of this in crypto. In general, all the applications we build are really complex. But it's important to understand how the human brain actually processes information visually. Think about it almost like a spotlight that moves around the page. I cannot perceive this entire page at once. And even for yourself, right? Look at the screen, try to pay attention to the buttons at the bottom and the text provide liquidity and earn interest at the top at the same time. You can't do it, right? Like we're not able to perceive an entire page at once. We are only able to focus in on individual pieces at any given time. And so when your user enters your page, right, they're going to first be drawn to whatever is boldest, which in this case are the buttons at the bottom. Is that what we want people to do? No, that's not. We want them to read their options first, right? But that's not what this screen's pulling them to. And second, whenever users see multiple things that look similar, it then causes their brain effectively to do a lot of mental effort to decide which one to pay attention to first. And on that point, there's a old psychology study called the JAM study, and essentially what happened in this study was you had two sets of researchers at a market on different days, and they're selling jams or spreads to people in the market. And so on one day they had a table that had 6 jams on it. On the other day they had a table that had 60 jams on it. Now, which one performed best? Well, more people stopped at the table with 60 jams to check it out because, of course, it's a much bigger table with a lot more stuff to see. But ultimately, the table with only 6 jams sold more jams at the end of the day than the table with 60. Because when we add an additional piece of complexity, we don't add another option and that's it. We actually multiply the complexity for our users. So ultimately, try to do less on every single page and make sure that there's one thing per page that users are focused on. In the example of the Coinbase UI, there's only one button that's bold blue. Everything else is not, because Coinbase wants to lead your eye first to buy and sell and then to your balance. That's what they're intentionally doing, and they've designed this interface to draw your attention in exactly that way, to manipulate that spotlight and pull it through the interface to exactly where they need it to be. When we worked on Solana name service, the only button on this page that's highlighted is add to cart. Now you may say, this user hasn't connected their wallet yet. Phil, why wouldn't we want them to connect their wallet first? Here's why. When they go click add to cart and we show them that it's in their cart, in order for them to quote unquote check out, they need to connect their wallet. So I know that I'm going to catch the user down the road. I know that later in the onboarding flow, they can connect their wallet later. What's important to me right now is that they know what domain they might buy, that they know how to add it to cart, and that they have context on why they might want to add it to cart. And that's why we have the why to get a .sol domain section to the side. Really cool example of this that I saw as well was the Ethereum wallet family, where if you're entering in your seed phrase manually, instead of showing you all of the boxes all at once, it actually shows you each box one at a time. I thought it's just a really, really brilliant UX there, and I think every wallet should do that in some way. So again, It's okay if this makes flows longer, ultimately, as long as users, as long as every user is very focused on what they're doing on any given page. So that's the abridged version of the talk. I really hope there's some advice here that may be helpful to you. But before we go, I also wanted to throw in a bit of an addendum that I threw into the talk that I gave at Founders School that may be helpful for some of you that already have design teams, already have your own staff internally, and how you can communicate with designers, how you can make sure that the interplay between design, product, and engineering is as smooth as it possibly can. So here's the general advice that we give to all the teams that we work with on how to communicate effectively with designers. First of all, I recommend everybody to read this book. There's a book by Ryan Singer called Shape Up, Stop Running in Circles and Ship Work That Matters. And the good news is that the book is actually free. So if you search this up on the internet, you'll find it on the Basecamp website. And it is hands down the most brilliant book about product management that I have ever read. It's very, very good. It provides so much practical advice, but there's a few pieces of it that I want to lift for you today that may be helpful in what you do. So one core problem that a lot of teams run into is the problem that wireframes are too concrete and words are too abstract. So if you have a product idea that you need to provide to a product designer, if you provide them detailed wireframes on what to do, it will inhibit the designer's ability to actually innovate and come up with cool new ideas. But if you just provide them with a spec, with just words, with bullet points and what it needs to do, then ultimately that may not provide enough context for a designer to effectively think through the UI, think through each interaction, all of that. So a good solution to present to a designer to design is something that really comprises of these three things. It's got to be rough, meaning that it's when it's handed to a designer, it cannot be good enough to ship or even close to it. It has to be something that's honestly just looks horrible, right? It's got to be solved, meaning that the overall solution is spelled out. If you built that very, very rough thing, it would work, right? It needs to work. It has to be bounded. It needs to be very, very clear what is not considered to be in scope for the solution. So they introduce kind of these two concepts I want to step through. One of them is breadboarding. This comes from electrical engineering. It's this idea that you build a prototype of something that does the thing, but is not, but may not do it in a really pretty way. So in this case, right, or think about like a microwave with all the controls actually separate from the actual microwave, and then like a box that you put food in and it like warms it up. Like just something that's a functional prototype without thinking at all about aesthetics, about how it looks, about how to present it, any of those things. So another way to do this more conceptually is just to show the interactions, right? So in this case of like an invoicing flow, you have an invoice screen. Within that, you have a function turn on autopay, set up autopay. Within that, you need credit card fields, logos, and submit. Then you have a screen called confirm. Within that, you have a thank you message. This is the level of specificity what you hand off to designers should be at. And if you're able to make sure it does all of these things, the designer can take it from there. They can figure out the remainder of the visuals and the aesthetics. Breadboarding, in other words, needs to include three things. Places, things you can navigate to like screens, dialogues, or menus that pop up. Affordances, things the user can act on like buttons and fields, interface copy, and connection lines that show how the affordances take the user from place to place. So another way to do this is also what we call fat marker sketches. And quite literally, when I'm sketching out an onboarding flow or any user flow, I actually use pen and paper. I use Sharpie markers and printer paper. I've been doing that as a designer for almost 10 years. And I'll tell you why. There's a lot of prototyping software out there that provides you, like, for example, there's one called Balsamic that I know a lot of people use. But they're really complex. If you've ever opened up prototyping software before or wireframing software, you know how many components there are on the page, how many things there are to put in. The goal of sketching out a wireframe is that it should be very fast. It should be super, super fast from whatever's in your mind to paper. And the way to make sure that you don't inadvertently spend time working on the wrong insignificant details, like how big is this font or what color is it, when you're just trying to get out the UX, the way to do that is actually to just use tools that prevent you from going into too much detail. This is an example. This is a to-do list that when you click, the menu on the left allows you to select from other tasks that you can press and add. This seems, again, really, really crude, but it's enough. If I have this and I have a breadboard, like I mentioned before, if I have this and I have an explanation of what functionality needs to be there and how that functionality connects to each other, that is enough as a designer for me to go from there and put something together. If you don't want to use Sharpie markers, there's also a piece of software that I really recommend. It's called Whimsical. And of all of the prototyping and wireframing software that we've used at Airfoil, Whimsical is probably the one that we've liked the most. And it really comes down to it's really limited in what it can do in a good way. It has good keyboard shortcuts so that you can really build muscle memory. It also just looks really nice and is really easy to use. But importantly, it is limited in how much it allows you to customize styling of elements on the page. And that's important to make sure that the wireframes that you hand off are closer to fat marker sketches than they are to complex wireframes. So 4 key to-dos that would be helpful to implement in your product. First, from landing page to product copy, always start with why. Always make sure you have that mission statement woven into everything from your copywriting to your illustrations to your product, like in product copy, everything. Second, you need to set success metrics that are beyond the number of users that just sign up. Make sure that when you put together your onboarding flow tracks your users from when they first enter your main website all the way through to when they've completed their first meaningful action. If you're not tracking that, then ultimately the number of people that visit your website, the number of people who connect their wallet is irrelevant. It matters how many people actually complete a meaningful action. Third, find a way to give first in your onboarding flow. Give first, then ask. Remember the example of dialect, providing stickers that you can then use in the product, as opposed to telling you, get people on the product, then we'll give you a reward. Lastly, ensure each page has just one thing that draws your user's primary focus. Think about the spotlight effect. Think about how you can move your user through your interface. And ultimately, it's okay to add additional steps as long as your user is better prepared meaningfully by going through those steps. Okay, so I'll send out the link as well in Discord so you can take a look at this later. Really hope that this was helpful, and we've got 15 minutes left and would love to dive into any and all Q&A. Okay. I do realize as well that while I was in the presenter view, I couldn't see any of the chat messages, so I'm just going through the chat messages now and seeing if there's something that I can address from the very beginning. Amazing. So I mean, Tuan, I completely agree. Glow's UX is super impressive. It's so easy to. I mean, they really sweat the details. However, and I think this is just a consequence of the fact that unfortunately, the Glow team, which is also part of Luma, they haven't been developing it as actively anymore. Glow has a very good focus on look and feel, on UI. But my critique of Glow, and just, I mean, you know, this is something that I've relayed to their team directly. They know it. They actually entirely agree. Glow could do more. When a user gets through that initial onboarding flow, they get to the screen where it says, okay, now add assets to your wallet, right? Glow could do more to provide them with something next to do, to provide them with examples of applications to connect to. This is the piece that I think that like Backpack with like XNFTs is doing better. And so I think that like it's really important to focus on that. I've actually been a little frustrated that there has been, I think, in Web3 this realization that design matters, And so there's a lot of wallets that have said we're going to focus on design. So for example, in the Ethereum world, I think about like Rainbow is a good example of that. When Rainbow was first launched, I was so excited because I was like, oh my God, finally an Ethereum wallet that actually cares about design. MetaMask clearly doesn't. So like this would be very, very good for the space. But ultimately, what did they change UX wise from any other wallet? Virtually nothing. Like the Rainbow wallet experience is prettier, but is it actually more usable? Is it more useful to people? I don't really think so. I don't think they've improved on that very, very much. And so like I think also one focus of what I like to talk about in design and Web3 is this importance of UX principles, research principles being a little bit more important actually than UI, at least for now, right? When the crypto market is massive and it's a super crowded consumer driven space, then I think, of course, aesthetics, branding, messaging will matter so much more within these products, but we're just not there. And so ultimately, we need UX that works more than we even need UI that works, right? I think that's super important. Second, Tuan, what you said about introduction screens, I mean, I think that's completely fair, and like I think users are very used to just saying accept, right, and just like moving through the introduction screens. I think the craftier way to do it is to really find ways to like hold their attention. The way I put it is this: if at the beginning of flying in a plane, they always have that safety video where they explain to you what you need to do in the case of an accident, and most people do not watch that video, right? One thing that I think is really brilliant that some airlines have been doing, and for example, like Vietnam Airlines actually would be a good example of this. I really really like their safety video because ultimately like it's pretty and has beautiful music and dancing and everything. But what does it mean? It means that I actually watch it. Like when I go, I don't know if it's the same for everybody here, but when I fly with them, I actually watch the video. When I fly Singapore Airlines, I actually watch the video. When I fly United Airlines in the United States, their video sucks. I don't watch it. So like there are ways to, yes, of course it's true that users are going to try to skip through these steps, but try to keep their attention, right? That's where it's helpful to be a little crafty, a little bit out of the box to help kind of keep users there. And the name for wireframing, Zhang, is whimsical. Whimsical. So I'll just type here. And you know what? I'll also drop in the link. I think that should be the right link. That link has a link to Whimsical as well as to all the other resources that I mentioned in the talk as well. And sorry if I'm a little bit slow this evening. In all honesty, I'm quite tired.
Yeah.
So as it's late, well, it's late here and it's late for you guys as well. So yeah.
Yes, it's about.
Great. Are there any other questions as well that I can address? We still got 9 minutes left, so happy to make the most of it.
Yes, it's about 10 p.m. in Vietnam right now.
Yep.
So it's
almost 11 here.
It's very late, but
it's not that different. It's not that different though. It's like it's 1 hour.
Yeah,
not a big deal.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. So we are looking.
Tuan, if you have any questions for me as well, like I'm happy to dive in, of course.
Yeah, I just waiting for the question of the people in the chat. And if we don't have any question, I think we can end workshop here. So maybe Zhang has some question. I think she had a lot of question.
Yes. Zhang, okay, she's typing. Okay.
Yeah, my sharing a little bit about my experience in the Web3. the first time I used.
By the way, I think that Zhang has seen this talk at least 5 times.
Oh, really?
So Zhang, I'm very, very grateful for you seeing it again and jumping on the stream tonight.
Yeah, maybe remember all of this.
So you're saying Vietnamese founder is more like solo founder?
Yeah. So when waiting for young question. Oh.
How can those technical guys seek for design support? So that's a very good question. I mean, I think that at the beginning of any venture, there is always a chicken and the egg problem, which is that you need to ship a product. Like, imagine if you were working in a large company and you said, we need to ship a brand new product. How many people would you have working on that product? 12 people, 24 people? The impossible task that every founder has is you go into this knowing that you do not have the privilege of building the team you want. You have to somehow get to the place where the product can take off, get to the place where it's made enough traction, gotten enough validation that you can bring in the fundraising and the capital to hire people and do all of that. But out the gate, you don't have that team and you have to somehow make do with it. So one reason that I customized the talk, I think, to not being too, I think, like technical about design, but instead talking about the process of design, is that I believe that's a process that anybody can do, whether they're a designer or not. You don't have to be a designer to adopt the process, right? And so I think that as a founder, in the spirit of what you have to do, which is you always have to just get good at everything, right? You may not be a finance guy, but you got to learn finance and fundraising. You may not be a design guy, but you got to learn design. You may not be an engineering, but you got an engineer, but you got to learn some engineering. Like, as a founder, you just have to find a way to be competent at everything, and know that the second you hire somebody professionally in your team to do it, they're going to race past you, but that's okay, right? So I think everybody should adopt the skills that I'm referring to here and the strategies I'm referring to here, and should practice it, right? I think it's actually very doable for any founder to bring that in. And if there's UX mentors you can turn to, then turn to it, right? Do sessions with them, like basically educate yourself as much as you can on this, and ultimately that'll help you have the skills you need to get across the finish line, to be able to fundraise down the road. Now, however, I also want to talk about like what you can do to kind of like, I would describe it as like cheat your way to a good UI, but here's what I mean by that. If you've seen Tailwind UI before, which is a paid UI kit that you can just buy out of the box, it's really well done. To be honest, most applications would do fine just using Tailwind. And so like, there you go. Like, a lot of times the reason that applications feel janky is because the UI kit is poor, right? Use a good one. Out the gate, you immediately improve the way that your application looks. I know that doesn't address the UX stuff that we've been talking about today, but the UX stuff is teachable. I think teachable pretty quickly. The UI stuff, I think, is actually harder to teach. That's where like you need a good professional product designer, because they need a lot of experience doing it. But if you can buy one that's just out the gate pretty good, then it can get you to a good place. Please don't use Google Material Design. It's not fantastic. Tailwind is great. And Zhang, to what you said, yeah, I agree that Tailwind is definitely a lot better on web. I actually would be interested to know like what you guys are using at Wallace for mobile, because I think the Wallace mobile is done as like is it done as a React Native app? So Tuan, maybe I'll explain like what my gripe is with Material. My gripe is with Material is this: like, I care a lot about how we can make sure to focus users' attention to the right thing. Every single time that you tap something in Material Design, there's like an explosion that goes off. I press a button and there's ripples, like all of a sudden. It's like it's a lot, but the other thing about it is I just think they made some bad UX decisions, right? Material design apps tend to rely heavily on the hamburger menu, right? Those three lines. I think there's actually been many UX studies that have looked into hamburger menus in particular. Generally speaking, you should not use a hamburger menu ever if you can avoid it. It's a really bad UX paradigm. Like really well done mobile apps, they don't use hamburger menus, they use bottom menus, right? So when you go into an app and you see like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, and then extra, right? Like that's where your menu should be. Material, I just think they made some pretty bad decisions like early on in that way. And material is also really tricky to theme. And this was like even back when I was like a front end engineer, I would inherit oftentimes code bases that were done with Material or were done with Ant Design. Ant Design is Alibaba's front end framework. And both of them are built so that they look good out of the box, right? The objective of putting together Material Design and putting together Alibaba's design system was that you should be able to pick up and use it as an engineer and not really worry very much about how it looks, and it should just look okay, right? But ultimately, there comes a time when you're going to need to retheme everything to fit your brand or something like that. And if you have to just be tearing out CSS like every other line because it's super hard to theme, then ultimately you're going to have this like engineering debt down the road that you have to resolve. Whereas like Tailwind UI is built on top of Tailwind CSS. And so ultimately it's really easy to theme it. It's like you can hide the fact that you're using Tailwind UI pretty easily. I don't think you can hide Material or Ant Design. I think those are just really hard to do. But that's just a pure opinion. I don't want to. That's none of that is fact. It's just all like my personal view. Yeah. So Zhang, with the so you mentioned that you use React, which makes sense. What are you using any front end kit right now, or did you just like build your own in-house? You're using like Tailwind CSS or using Masonic or anything else? Okay, yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I don't think Zhang is
I think also like
developer.
if like I agree that Tailwind UI is not great on mobile, but you can also still use Tailwind CSS and then just build your own UI kit on top of Tailwind CSS. And then I think that resolves the issue on mobile as well. So yeah, but yeah, I'd be super interested to know like what library you guys use at some point, and take a look at it, because I'm always interested to see. And also this stuff moves so fast. Like I fully remember when React was like the new thing, and there was a lot of pushback to adopting React. And now I feel like Next.js is coming through and just like replacing React everywhere. And I mean, I'm not an engineer anymore, so I'm not following this stuff as actively as I used to. But every couple years, the stack just totally changes, and I feel like things are always like changing so rapidly. It's hard to like keep track of it. Oh, refactoring you. Oh, that's a great resource. Yes, I highly recommend reading Refactoring UI. I know a lot of folks on our team have used it. So great catch.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we are looking for a new question. If we do not have any question, I think we can end the workshop here.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, would love to get to know more members of the Superteam Vietnam team the next time that I'm in Ho Chi Minh. Probably hopefully will be sometime in January. So
yes, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Phil, for joining us today.
amazing. Have a great night, everybody.